2022. If you can all join me in I'm sorry, is someone asking something? Oh, I hearing things. If you can all join me in the Pledge of Allegiance first with a moment of silence. If y'all join me in the pledge, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. So, oh, and I should have done the roll call first. So, Guido, if you would do the roll call.
Sure. Chair Amadeo.
Here.
Vice Chair McCarthy.
Here.
Commissioner Herr.
Here.
I know she's here. She's in the meeting.
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Rana.
Yeah.
Commissioner St. John.
Here.
Commissioner Walton.
Here.
Commissioner Whitson. Commissioner Whitson is absent right now.
Okay. So we'll move on to special announcements and communications from the floor. So we'll see if anyone of our attendees first has any special announcements or communications. If so, please raise your virtual hand. And I don't see anybody raising their hands, so we will go to the commissioners. If any commissioner wishes to make a special announcement or has communication of interest to the public, please raise your hand now. And I don't see any commissioners raising their hands, so we will move on to the consent agenda. So as I stated before we opened the meeting, we're going to just do the consent agenda as the minutes. And we'll do that first, and then we've got two public hearings that should be very simple, and we'll do those afterwards. So can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda item A?
So moved.
We have a motion by Commissioner St. John, I think. And do I have a second, please?
Yes, I second.
By Commissioner Rana. All those in favor, please say aye. Oh, no, excuse me. We have to do this by roll call.
Commissioner Woodson just entered, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So,
there he
roll
is.
call. You want to, Commissioner Woodson? We're voting on the minutes right now. So
I heard.
Okay. Chair Amadeo.
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy.
Yes.
Commissioner Herr.
Yes.
Commissioner Rana.
Yes.
Commissioner St. John.
Yes.
Commissioner Walton.
Yes.
Commissioner Whitson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go now on to consent agenda item B, which is a public hearing. So Guido, if you could give us just an introduction, and then I can open it up to the public.
Great. Senior Planner Allison will be giving the very quick presentation.
Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, commissioners. And this item, as mentioned, has to do with a simple amendment to the R4 zoning district, that is the multifamily residential zoning district, which had inadvertently had its original height limit removed. Staff just came upon this in the normal course of business, and this is a simple correction. As you noted in your staff report, at the time of the adoption in 2020 of the accessory dwelling unit ordinance, it appears that the only height in the zoning district for residential multifamily was reflected for ADUs in that zone. So we are simply proposing that the Planning Commission recommend to the Council a formal amendment to the code to bring the original height limit of 42 feet and 3 stories back to this section of the code. And as part of your staff report, you see a planning commission resolution with the very short exhibit with the draft ordinance amendment. And so it's a super easy, quick fix, and we're hoping that your commission will recommend approval to the council. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Allison. So I do need to ask commissioners if you have any questions or comments on this before I go out for the public hearing. And I don't see any hand raised. So now I will open the public hearing. Any members of the public who wish to speak to this issue, please raise your hand. And no one is raising their hand, so I will close the public hearing and accept the motion from the commissioners. Commissioner Rana, I see that your screen is lit up, even though I can't see you or your hand. Are you preparing to make a motion? And he's not responding.
I'm having some technical difficulties now. Yes.
Okay. So can I get a motion from someone, please?
Yes. I will make a motion that as noted, the height limit be returned as originally in the codes.
The height limit and the number of stories?
Right, height limit and the number of stories.
Okay, can I get a second, please?
I'll second.
All right, Audra, Commissioner Walton has seconded Commissioner St. John's motion. Is that motion acceptable, Guido, for staff?
Sure.
Okay, great. So if we can have a roll call vote, please.
Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr, Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Woodson. Motion passes 5-2. I did not hear from Commissioner Herr or Commissioner Woodson.
I think both may have had their mics off.
Okay.
My mic's
It seems that,
should be able to hear me.
yeah, you have difficulty hearing me.
We hear you fine now.
Okay.
Same thing. Did you not hear me?
No,
Uh,
I saw
I
lips
said
moving,
yes.
but I didn't hear anything from
Okay.
either one of you.
Motion passes 7-0 then.
Very good. Thank you. All right, let's move on to the third consent agenda item. C, this is open a public hearing and take public testimony and reconsidering adopting a corrected resolution recommending City Council approval of amendments to Articles 1, 2, and 4 of Title 17 of the Marina Municipal Code pertaining to small and large family childcare homes, daycare centers, supportive housing, conditional use permits for multifamily housing. No other changes are proposed. You guys heard this at the last meeting. The proposed amendments are exempt from environmental review per section 15061 parentheses B parentheses 3 of the CEQA guidelines presented by Senior Planner Allison Hunter. So Allison, it's all yours.
Yes, thank you again, and good evening once more. As the chair described, this is another just quick repeat. It came to our attention that at your last meeting on September 22nd, you received this exact same staff report with the draft resolution and draft ordinance, but the ordinance simply omitted the specific section numbers pertaining to the supportive housing. So just in your staff report under summary, there's a new paragraph that's underlined that simply describes this. And the sections were in this draft added, of course, and they're highlighted in yellow. So it's the definition of supportive housing from the California Health and Safety Code is added to the definitions. The changes you discussed at your last meeting were added to the C1, C2, and PC zoning districts, as well as a change in the conditional uses. And that's it. Everything else is exactly the same as you reviewed at your last meeting. So if there are any additional questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So do any of the commissioners have questions they'd like to make? And I'm not seeing any. So I'm going to open the public hearing. Any member of the public who wishes to make comment or ask questions on this, please signify by raising your hand. And I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to close the public hearing and we'll accept a motion on this item. I need a motion.
I'll motion to amend the article for residential multifamily R4 zoning district as presented by staff.
And can I get a second?
I will second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by commission.
Through the chair, pardon me
Yes.
for interrupting, but that motion was pertaining to the last item. If we could have a clarifying motion that pertains to this supportive housing item, that would be great.
My apologies.
Okay.
I move to accept the staff report for the supporting housing and to go along with staff recommendations.
Okay, Commissioner Hurd, does your second still hold?
Yes, I will second.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Any comments on the motion? I'm not seeing any, so if we can have a roll call vote.
Sure. 1 second. Chair Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr,
Yes,
Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Walton,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitson. Commissioner Whitson.
Yes.
Okay. Motion approved.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our public hearings. These are both new items, not corrections. So the first one, item A, is open a public hearing, take public testimony, and consider making a recommendation to the City Council that it approve the proposed modifications to remove or extend exterior improvement requirements from the conditional use permit 2019-03 and City Council Resolution 2020-65, allowing a medical adult use cannabis dispensary at 3100 Del Monte Boulevard with the APN number. This project is exempt from environmental review per Article 19, Section 15301 of the CEQA guidelines and is presented by Associate Planner Nick Neckery. And I probably pronounced his last name wrong too. So Nick?
Thank you, Chair. Everyone can see my screen, I hope.
Yes.
Excellent. So today, or this evening, I should say, I'm here to present on the conditional use permit amendment for 3100 Del Monte Boulevard's commercial use tenant, the Pacific Roots Dispensary, also known as Catalyst. So here's the background on this project. It was first approved by this particular use permit was approved by the Planning Commission all the way back in May of 2020. Then the City Council approved it June of 2020. They hit some delays with this project, and so they got a 90-day extension from the city manager, as well as a 120-day extension from the City Council in August of 2021, and that pushed off their final occupancy requirement to the 6th of January 2022. They were able to being finalized by the building department and all, for the interior improvements on January 3rd, 2022. And per their conditions of approval number 10, they have 1 year after final occupancy to be in full compliance with all their conditions of approval, which is what brings us here today. On September 1st, 2022, the applicant applied to amend their conditions of approval to remove their facade changes, as well as give themselves an extra year just for the public improvements. So as you can see, these are the conditions of approval that they're amending. So the first one is to remove their, pardon the noise. The first one, they're removing the facade changes in condition of approval number 1. And then, of course, like I said, the public improvements. And then with the public improvements comes some parking changes, which I'll get into later in my presentation. So, oops, sorry, I went too far. So this is the page that they're proposing to remove. This is their facade changes. As you can see, they're changing the type of roof that's there. The existing is a wooden tile, and then they're proposing to they were proposing to change the to a stucco from what currently is wooden panels. So they're proposing to remove this due to various reasons, as mentioned in their. We'll speak to that in their presentation after my presentation, but it's mostly budgetary issues. This is the way it looks right now. They've, in their letter to staff and for this amendment, they offered to beautify the site by adding plants and to redo the planter, refresh the planter, and to take any input from the Planning Commission and other ways to beautify the whole site. I spent a long time speaking with the applicant, and we came up, I walked the site and looked at the site a number of times. As you can see that there's a board missing here. Some of the paint is sort of deteriorated a little bit. So they've agreed to make some minor improvements to the front of the building to make it look nicer overall. So a nice little refresh of the building. And then for the second piece of this, they're planning to push off they would like to push off the public improvements until January 3rd of 2024. So that's actually 1 year from the expiration of the current conditions of approval. So with this public improvement, what it does is it will remove spaces that are along the building right here. These are all legal conforming because they're in the public right of way, so they actually can't be counted as parking for the site. And what it will replace it with is an ADA sidewalk with curb cuts for driveways and 5 on-street parking spaces. So definitely will help pedestrian safety, improve this building, and it'll help us achieve our complete streets program, which is a public works program. We're trying to update all the streets in Marina. The reason why and I should mention here, in discussions with our City of Marina engineer, the reason why they're not doing the Del Monte improvements is because we don't yet have the final design for the Del Monte Boulevard improvements. I spoke to our Public Works Director, Brian McMinn, and they are going to start with the reservation and Del Monte Boulevard intersection. And what they learned from those designs, they can incorporate into their design for the overall Del Monte Boulevard. And so this project, I believe they have funding for the reservation Del Monte Boulevard already approved and ready to go. So once that's finished, then they'll use that information to do the rest. And so few years, we will embark on improving all of Del Monte. I'm not quite sure the timeline on that, but you'll start to see that coming in city council meetings. And so our engineer decided not to require them to do the Del Monte Boulevard improvements, simply because one time install curb, sidewalk, and gutter and planting strips, and then rip them out within a few years. So for now, they're just keeping this. And so what that does is they're no longer going to lose all this parking along Del Monte Boulevard. But they eventually will lose all the parking along Del Monte Boulevard once the city does put in those improvements. And so I still included condition number 33 to ensure that when they put in these parking, that when they put in this curb cut sidewalk and gutter, however it's designed, that they'll maintain enough parking for the commercial spaces. So at that time, they'll be required to enter into a shared parking agreement with the motel. The motel is owned and managed by the property owner, and the property owner has agreed that their parking spaces are not fully utilized during the day. Based on the parking study, it looks like they have some capacity to be able to use 11 of those spaces for the commercial spaces along Monte Boulevard. So there's 5 tenant spaces. And per their parking study, they're at peak demand hours. There's, night and day. They need up to 59 spaces. And I think the peak is at the day. And so with this shared parking plan, it would result in no impact to parking for the businesses or the motel. And it would allow everyone to have enough parking spaces for each commercial space. I should also mention that the original use in this space, the previous use had a parking requirement of 20 spaces, and the current use has a reduced parking count. I believe it's 11. So they've actually, could be wrong on those numbers, but they've reduced the parking with this new proposed, with the current use. So they actually have a lower threshold of parking for retail use. So overall, the parking will not be impacted by the current, with the current 1-year improvements. And then once the final improvements go in, I do have that condition of approval in there to make sure that they are compliant with parking. So, so staff recommendation is the one shown on the screen here. I'm not going to read all of it, but it's basically to allow for the facade changes to be removed, to look at, to require them to do the beautification, and also for all the parking changes to be memorialized with condition number 33 in the case of approval as far as the resolution. So I'm sure you guys have some questions for me. I also want to just reaffirm that the applicant is here and he is going to give a presentation in more detail. I also want to just mention quickly that I hope you guys read the letter from the owner saying that he's in support of all the improvements to the building, and he authorizes the applicant to make those repairs and changes to the building to improve it. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over back to the chair.
Thank you, Nick. If you can remove your, thank you. That way I can see better. Okay, so first questions from commissioners. And first question is from Vice Chair McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. 3 questions I'll go through quick. And first, I just want to say that I really found the staff report to be really thorough and full of all of the relevant facts. And I know it probably gets old as we step up and say this about staff reports, but really it's so important and really allows, I think, us to play our role a lot better. So I appreciate that. First question is about the parking. And I just noticed in the staff report that it says an employee parking agreement. So is that to say that customers wouldn't be allowed to park in the motel? Is it only for employees? And if so, does our code differentiate between employees and customers, or is this just a special agreement for this particular project?
Let's see. So for the condition of approval, I'm just going to share my screen briefly so people can see what I'm looking at. So I just wanted to pull it up to confirm. So the condition of approval that staff is proposing is stated here, number 33. So within 30 days of the completion of offsite improvements along Del Monte Boulevard, applicant shall provide the city with an executed shared parking agreement with the property owner. That 11 parking spaces shall be shared. I didn't specify whether they're going to be shared. So I didn't specify whether they're going to be shared for the commercial tenants or I left that blank.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be for customers. That was my assumption, that it'd be for customers, and if if employees need to park there too. I mean, it would just be for anybody, not
And
specific.
perhaps it would be appropriate to put signs in that would say additional parking in the motel or something so that folks know, because
Right.
it's a very
Right.
differentiated space. So
Yeah, it is. It's definitely differentiated right now. I also added another one that all corresponding signs and striping must be installed within 30 days as well. So that way, so give us an agreement within 30 days, and then within 30 days of that, show us that the parking lot's been changed. Because you're right, if you go there now, each different space, commercial space, shows parking for X, Y, and Z on each one. So.
okay. Second question is, there's a parking spot. If you go back to your slide, there's a parking spot to the right of where that Honda is. And there used to be, of course, the big Mortimer sign there. A line, when that sign was taken out, a line was drawn and it added 2 additional spots. So to the right of that Honda, and then where the white car is behind it. So those spots never existed previously. And my question is that something that the city signed off on, and are they confident it doesn't present any dangers, or do you know, or?
Yeah, I can speak to that. The space that you're speaking of, the one to the right of the Honda, is going to be removed with the new sidewalk, because the sidewalk's going to go right through it with the next year's site improvements. That will disappear. And I don't know if, that was the 2 spaces that we were acquired with this were the 2 handicap spaces.
Okay. And then the last question, is staff aware of if this wasn't to get approved tonight, or if the license was to expire, let me put it that way, is staff aware of any other folks that want to step in and participate in this license procedure, or can you speak to that at all?
Sure. So the authority, the authorized body to make the decision of, the people that are what I'm trying to say is the city council made the final action of this item. So this planning commission's role here is to make a recommendation to the city council. So if the planning commission makes a recommendation to, the city council to deny the changes or wants to modify staff's recommendation in some way, that would then go to the city council right after this. So whenever we can schedule that next meeting. So that's the next step. So, and if the city council decides to deny this amendment, what that will mean is that the city manager will not be able to affirm that they are in full compliance with the conditions of approval as required in, with their use permit.
Unless, of course, they get funding and decide they can implement the changes, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if they put everything in before January 3rd, then,
okay.
Yeah. So, so staff's recommendation is more or less is to accept their proposed amendments I've discussed what kind of improvements they could make to the site, because the site does need some maintenance and a little bit of, and they really want to put some plants out front and make it look prettier. I'll let them speak to more to that later, but yeah.
And Nick, if I could just step in real quick to answer the vice chair's question. So the answer, if the commission makes a recommendation one way or the other, and the council either sustains it or overturns it and doesn't give them an extension, then they would not be in compliance. And then the ordinance has a pretty detailed process of people would have to go through the lottery process. They get selected. So there's a whole process in the ordinance in terms of who would potentially get the license. But that is not before this body. This body is not the final body. It's a rather unique ordinance. It says use permit, which usually planning commissions deal with. But in this case, as Nick indicated, the city council is the final body. And I also wanted to point out that kudos to Commissioner Walton. She actually is off the video and off of audio. She did recuse herself from this item. She did not publicly state that, but we did talk to her earlier today. So she did do that. And Nick has more of the backstory, but I understand she was involved in one of the cannabis submittals 2 or 3 years ago. So I just wanted to put on the record that she has recused herself from this item. And for the rest of the commissioners and the newer commissioners, when you recuse yourself, especially when we're on video, you have to shut off your audio, shut off your video. And when we eventually go back to in-person, the practice is you have to actually leave the room. And so anyways, just wanted to put that on the record. So just wanted to help Nick out in terms of your question, Vice Chair.
May I ask a quick question related to that?
Sure.
Can she not, when it's opened up for the public hearing, she could speak as a member of the public as long as she's not doing anything prior to that to try and influence the commission? Is that correct when you recuse yourself?
I think technically you're right, Chair Amadeo, but I think most cities try to just, if you're going to recuse yourself, just so there's no question, but you technically are right. If you recuse yourself from an item, and I don't know about the council, I'd have to defer to the city attorney on that, but for a commissioner, technically, if we were in person, they could come up to the dais and say, I am not speaking as a commissioner. I'm only here as a public citizen, and then say whatever they're going to say. But it's probably better just to totally recuse yourself. So
yeah, it's and you're right. The city council, you do step down, you leave the room, and you may come back in and speak to the item when it's before the public for them to speak, and then you have to leave again.
Right.
You're not allowed to stay in there.
Exactly. So, yeah. So just wanted to get that on the record. So.
Okay, thank you. So Vice Chair McCarthy, you have more questions?
Thank you, Chair.
I'm sorry, all I heard was thank you, Chair.
Yeah, that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any other questions from commissioners? And I don't see any hands raised, so we're going to go out to the public. I'm going to open the public hearing, and then we would like to first hear from the applicant. And so if you can tell me who the applicant is in here so that we can allow him or her, it looks like all hims, to talk.
So he's already a panelist. His name is Blake, and he just turned on his video. I don't know if you see him.
Oh, wonderful. I see him now.
Yeah.
Okay, Blake.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure you guys had the floor. Yeah, so hi, my name's Blake Hogan. I'm the project manager for Pacific Roots Marina. I'm going to share my screen now. Hopefully this works successfully. So I'm just trying to do a little dual screen, so apologies. Just give me a moment. Just trying to make sure that perfect. Can you guys see my presentation?
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure you guys can see it. Okay, all right, I will get going. So as I said, my name is Blake Hogan. I'm the project manager for Pacific Roots Marina. Here to go over the consideration of updating the conditional use permit to remove the facade improvement and extend our deadline for improvement. So I wanted to kind of, basically it's gonna kind of go where we've been, where we are now, and where we'd like to go moving forward with the city. So where we have been, so as was already discussed with staff, the city council extended us for the 120 days extension to allow us to make the modifications necessary in order to open. And on January 3rd, 2022, Pacific Roots Marina, also known as Catalyst Marina, opened its doors. And then here's a picture from our grand opening that was on February 26th, 2022. So we were able to make that 120 days and we were able to open. Kind of wanted to kind of even show how much really went into these improvements. So as you can see, it formerly was the bar as well as kind of a karaoke area. Obviously the floors, you can see the walls, you can see, very, very vastly improvements, obviously tons of storage. And now here we are. So now you can see a nice, very clear, here's our buy room, very nice clean white walls, smooth floors. Obviously we have all our product displayed there, nice fresh lighting that's all energy efficient. We have our lobby area, which, is nice, nice and welcoming. We're the front desk there, a little, area for that, as well as, our updated restroom. And then just to show that it's, not just in the front, but even in the back, you can see this is our little community area, as well as the order processing area where we have, orders basically put together. And, once again, you can kind of see, fresh ducting, fresh, everything, up to, top standards. Obviously, as we discussed, this is where our exterior at now, as you saw, for the, all we really did was we updated the door for security purposes. We updated the signage. So obviously it didn't, show the bar, it just simply showed our catalyst. So you can see the front, you see it's very consistent with the entire Mortimer Center. Then you can kind of see the side of the building, signage, as well as the back. Obviously everything's clean. You can see the fresh striping that we did for the parking. So, really consistent, but, very, solid upkeep. So why are we here? So where we are now. So in order to get the interior to where it was, we spent $1,084,638 on the build out alone. This does not include rent. This doesn't include plans. This is just simply the construction costs. And since then, in order to be running the store, since it opened its doors January 3rd, we're currently at running at a loss of $368,818.68 to be exact. So obviously, I've all new businesses, but being that cannabis has a lot of extensive costs, we're running, very high loss. But we are proud to have 12 employees, 2 full-time security guards, and 1 part-time security guard. So we're open, but we do have a full staff that union employees that are working there that we're happy to employ. I also wanted to add, because obviously we had the letter of support from our property owner. I also wanted to note some letters of support from our staff, as well as some Marina residents. One of our actually a Marina resident, Caitlin, went from being a receptionist to actually becoming a dispensary manager. She just wanted to, write us, letter of support. I know, can you guys kind of read it? I can read it aloud if you want me to, or, I just want to make sure, but basically she just talks about, how it's been great working with us. She knows that it's, very tough to be profitable, and she, just hopes that you guys approve these modifications in order for us to, keep moving forward to the next step. I will then move to the next letters. All the letters are the same, but there's 3 different Marina residents. We asked them, hey, would you be willing to sign this letter showing your support? And they were happily willing to oblige. Basically, they were, showing that, hey, we like being, Catalyst Marina being here, and we hope that, planning goes with staff recommendations. So we have one here, another gentleman by the name of Ryan, and then finally Joel also. So 3 residents. We just simply said, hey, are you willing to put your name down? And they're happy because they, like what we're doing, and they want us, to stay there. So obviously, with all that being said, where do we want to go from here? We obviously want to stay open, and we want to keep, working with the city of Marina. We want to, are happy to make the beautification improvements that staff did, working with the landlord to not just improve our little corner, but, make those little updates to the sod, add to the planners as usual, because we know that's important. And, as you can also see, if you also saw the letter from the landlord also is kind of in agreement that he really he's happy to do the beautification, but, probably from the previous facade changes, just keep it so that it has that look. But we're hoping that you go with staff recommendations, allowing us to move forward and move on to these next steps. And obviously, that's all I have. Does anyone have any questions for me at this time?
Okay, if we can close your screen so that I can.
Oh, yes. So sorry. Yes, I remember.
That's all right.
No worries. All right. There you are.
It's much easier for me to see if there are questions.
Yes, yes, of course.
If the screen is closed.
Not a problem.
So do any of our commissioners have any questions for Blake?
I have
Please
a question.
All right, go ahead, Surinder.
Yes.
Yes, how is this beautification or proposed beautification related to the profitability of your business?
So the profit, are you talking about basically the reason that we're asking for the removal of the facade improvements?
Yep.
Yeah, so part of the reason is that obviously to make these facade improvements would be very costly for us. We estimated the cost to be upwards of $180,000, which when you're already running at a loss of $370,000, that additional is a large burden on the business. So that additional facade improvement would just be an additional hindrance, after already investing so much to the company, as well as honestly using that money to, employ our union employees to keep the doors open. So by adding those additional costs, it would hinder, the ability for us to, keep things going, keep things moving forward.
Okay.
Commissioner Rana, do you have any other questions?
No.
No. Okay, so Commissioner St. John.
Yes, thank you. Just a couple of quick questions for Blake.
Sure.
What is your proposed timeline to complete the revised improvements, and how does that affect the extension, or how much extension are you actually needing in your conditional use permit?
I believe the staff recommendation was if this was improved, we had to make those improvements. Nick, was it within 60 days of approval? Can you confirm?
Yeah, I can confirm. So for the beautification, it's 60 days. For the minor repairs and the planters and all that, those changes. So that would be from the final action of the city council. So 60 days from that is what I would, what we're proposing. And then the site improvements, they would have until January 3rd, 2024. So a year from January 3rd, this January 3rd. So that gives them so it depends on when the city council approves it, but it'll give them a little bit more than a year. But it'll give them a year from their deadline, basically, for those public improvements.
And the reason I wanted to know that is because I'm obviously going with staff recommendation. So we're agreeing that we would complete both the facade those recommended facade improvements within that 60-day timeline, as well as the public works improvements by the January 3rd of 2024.
Do you have any other questions, Commissioner St. John?
No, thank you. Thank you, Blake.
Okay, Vice Chair McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for being here, Blake. Condition 20 talks about transfer of permit, and it talks about, no permit shall be transferred without consent of the city. And when this body first approved design review of this, it was a Pacific Roots branding with an ocean theme and blue colors throughout. And obviously a lot has changed. And so I guess my question is, what happened? Was there a transfer that went through the city, or because as a commissioner, I'm kind of in the dark, and I'm just curious if you could shed some light on that.
Yeah, of course. Basically, the owners of Pacific Roots Marina LLC, which were Avi Marciano, Aaron Johnson, and Brandon Gasecki, decided to partner strictly for management to help. They had not run a dispensary, and so they brought on Catalyst strictly as helping out management for running data operations, and then worked with us management agreement in terms of using our branding, as well as using our knowledge of Catalyst. But there was no ownership change came. This is I'm simply a project manager, and Catalyst is simply a management company that works with all three owners, who are the owners of Pacific Roots Marina. And so and they agreed to then just simply work with a name change, but no ownership was changed. It was just simply we came on as managers, not managers of the LLC, but a management company.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question, second question rather is, when we approved Pacific Roots, they went through the kind of a nice little talk about what their logo meant, and it was hailed back to the Union Pacific Railway that's across the street. I'm just curious if you could talk about the Catalyst logo and kind of if there's any meaning that goes behind that, or
basically the Catalyst, the logo itself, there's nothing much. Basically the delta symbol is, basically is a meaning of change. Delta means change, and so that's where the delta symbol comes into play. And then Catalyst, I guess if you want to know, not necessarily, I don't know if you want to know logo or more the name, but the logo, that's where the logo really comes, is just Catalyst. And then just the A is just a, what, was formerly A, now is just a, I guess you could say an upside down V is more of just they are marketing team, just like the way it looked, because it just looked, kind of unique as opposed to just being a simple A. Does that answer your question, or did you want more meaning behind the actual
it does.
name? Okay.
Whatever color you wanted to provide. I actually learned a little myself when I was hearing from others that I guess Delta 8 and 9 are different descriptors of and
yes, that is true. That is a different, there is Delta 8 and Delta 9 when it comes to THC. That I know it sounds, but it is very coincidental, because when we actually came up with it, I was there when our name came up, and the Delta was really more of a symbol of change, just because we like that idea of, because that's what this business is. It's a big, it's a change. It's a change from something, from way things have been for a very long time. And so we like that inspiration.
Okay, thank you, Blake. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And now we are going to move on to attendees. So we're opening the public hearing for those in attendance. If anybody here has any questions for staff or for Blake, now's the time to raise your hand and be recognized. And again, I don't see anybody raising their hand, so I'm going to close the public hearing and come back to the commission. So commissioners, this would be the time for comments and for a motion. So do we have anyone who wishes to make a comment? And I see Vice Chair McCarthy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. And bear with me, because I know our procedure is to save comments till the end. So I've got quite a few, but the first thing I want to say is, with the transfer of permit, and I'm through no fault of Catalyst, but I think it's extremely disingenuous the way this has happened, and maybe it's a fault in our ordinance, and maybe we need to come back and look at what a transfer really means, and how, when we approve a business where we say it can't transfer, but it kind of morphs into something fairly different than what was approved. I think there's just a lot of questions there, and I'm not interested in having that discussion on this item, but I am interested in having that discussion in general terms with staff, and seeing if maybe we need to take a second look at our ordinance. The second thing I want to say is that the staff report mentions that all the interior improvements were completed. I have a little bit of a different view on that. Again, this body approved design that was, had an ocean theme and had different colors. And, because this business has their door open, a majority of the time the business itself is open. And because the windows have no window treatments, you see right into that business. It's just white walls. And it's just, in my opinion, not what this body approved. So another area where I just have a different opinion on the staff report. But most importantly, I'm concerned that when the city council approved this lottery process, or this process of businesses applying for these 3, valuable cannabis dispensary licenses, that we tried very hard to be fair and have a level playing field. And now we're telling a business who has gotten a 90-day extension, and then has gotten a year extension, or 120-day extension, now wants a year extension, that they're basically not going to be held to those commitments that were discussed in the public realm when this kind of went through. And so I have a lot of heartburn with that. It would be my hope that if we denied this tonight, that the business would find the funding to make the improvements that they promised the community, and that we could move forward as a community, and that the business would stay. But if they're not able to do that, I don't know that I'm personally prepared to approve a motion that allows that to be kicked down the road another year. This process is 4 years in the making. From the time the city started talking about cannabis dispensaries and applicants started showing interest. So that's a long time for me. I'm very interested in bringing in businesses that want to contribute to the community. And again, I hope that that's Catalyst Pacific Roots, and I hope that they can make do on the improvements that were originally discussed. So, and if not, then I hope that, the city can open it up and see if anyone else is willing to do that. And maybe it's Catalyst that comes back as part of that process and says, hey, these are our new improvements that we're going to make, and they're not as robust, and, goes through that process, and they can stay in that way too. But that's kind of where I'm at. But I'm definitely interested in hearing from other commissioners. Thank you, Chair.
Thank
I
you,
concur.
Vice Chair McCarthy. Wait a minute, Commissioner Rana, Commissioner Herr had her hand up. You really do need to raise your virtual hand in order to speak. So I'm going to recognize Commissioner Herr.
Well, in fact, Commissioner McCarthy touched upon what I wanted to say earlier before the meeting officially started. Because if I remember correctly, when we gave extension to this cannabis dispensary, there was another applicant present who did not get selected for this site, and this other applicant talked about favoritism on our end from the city that we are giving the chosen candidate or the applicant something in addition that others were not getting. So I just wanted to I'm bringing it to the table because so that we among our commissioners and the public would be aware that we have to be, we are not giving special favors to the existing owner. And also, I also have similar concern as what Commissioner McCarthy has raised as well, because we have been giving extensions, on different, time periods, and where is our limit so that we'll be seen as fair to everybody when we make decisions.
Thank you, Commissioner Herr. Do you have any other questions or comments?
That's it for me for now.
Okay. Commissioner Rana.
Yes, I concur with Vice Chair McCarthy's point of view. We need to be more deliberate on this issue. Thank you.
And Commissioner Woodson.
Yeah, I think going with the other commissioners, I'm not disturbed by the process. I think the economy has changed. I think the decision-making process took many years and many iterations. I have challenges with how the selection process went and where we ended up and how we got to here. But my thought right now is kind of going back to the bigger development of this whole facade, not just Catalyst on the end, is that we're looking at making the changes. We're looking at extending this to meet the longer term revitalization needs that we are proposing as part of the bigger plan for that corridor. And I think my concern is by linking the improvements here to development of the bigger revitalization, are we not setting precedent for any change to any facility? And if we are, then why are we accepting it here when we didn't accept it at other facilities and issues that came before both the Planning Commission and the City Council over the last year. And I have to go into specific details of other facilities, but I don't think that's germane necessarily to the conversation as much as why do we get to make why are we trying to make an exception here? And we didn't do that in other places. And we didn't, when we put our foot down there, the answer was, oh, well, we can't do it now because it's just the way it is. And that revitalization plan isn't in place. So we have no driver. Is it just because we have a drive? I guess so. My question then is it because this is a maintenance improvement? So therefore this is not driven by any development laws. So we're allowed to do it, number one. And then number two, if we're only making real changes to half of the facility at a bigger level, this goes back to some of the sign issues that we discussed with T-Mobile. That what are we trying to present on this corridor? We had a very long discussion about what we wanted to do with T-Mobile. And yes, it's a different facility. It's a different building on a different street, but part of the same corridor. And if I look at the bigger picture of that map, right in the big center, we have Mortimer's Square or Mortimer. And so it's just, what are we trying to achieve here by allowing a delay? If we're allowing a delay, which is going to bring us into a more compliant overall facility that's going to meet what we want for the overall revitalization of this entire corridor, then I am more willing to look at agreeing to a delay. If we're just doing it to create a delay to provide a better business environment to allow the improvements, I'm not sure if I agree with that. I think that's my statement or questions.
And perhaps staff could answer the questions that Commissioner Woodson was bringing up as it relates to other things that we have seen over the last year. I can name one in particular that there was a lot of concern about because we could not make the changes that we wanted to. And I do know that particular site had we couldn't make the changes because it was a non-conforming use already. So we had to live with the non-conforming use, or they couldn't do anything at all. Is that correct? Am I answering that question correct? And if not, please answer the question and addressing his.
So I'm sorry, my video cut out, Commissioner Woodson. Can you repeat the question? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So,
it's got. I'll go on.
No, I was going to say, Commissioner Woodson, I was going to recognize you to go ahead and maybe restate your question, but as simply as possible.
Sure. So I think over the last year, we have made multiple approvals for changes along the corridor of Reservation and Del Monte, which is part of the new revitalization effort and plan that has not been approved final. And we have allowed changes to occur, some in conforming properties, some in non-conforming properties. But the intent is that in the non-conforming areas, we have kicked it down the stream and said, well, we don't have any control over this. So even though we would love for it to meet the new goals of revitalization and what we want to do, because the plan is not in place, we can't do it. So that's kind of the background context. The question that then comes up to it is, if this delay that we're being requested to approve is going to allow us to bring this into compliance with what we are trying to put in place with the new revitalization plan, I guess that is the question. Is this delay going to allow us to do that? Because otherwise we're just allowing a delay for business reasons.
So, as planners, we can only really enforce on the books what's adopted, and Commissioner Woodson pointed out that, the downtown plan, it's been going on for quite a while. Part of the reason why I got hired is I have quite a bit of development experience. And so we are going to be actively working on the downtown plan. That's going to be after the affordable housing overlay. But it would seem challenging to make this customer try to comply with that plan when it hasn't even been adopted yet. And we probably won't get it adopted for at least another year. maybe even year and a half, depends on how much outreach we have to do. Hopefully sooner rather than later. So yeah, hopefully it answered. But yeah, it would be tough to make them, because the plan might change. Because when I got started with the city in December, started looking through the plan, there's a lot of subjective elements to the plan that have to be removed by state law. So the big chunks of the plan have to be rewritten. And so it would be very difficult for me to tell the customer, oh, you have to comply with this document that probably is going to get a substantial change, not, fully gutted, but, pretty significant modifications. So yeah, does that answer your
But I think
question, Commissioner Woodson?
Well, but the flip side of that, and I think this is my point, the flip side of that is if we approve a delay, which now takes it out another year, as you just, by the staff's own recommendation, is this is going to take it out at least a year, it looks like. If we do that, and if the new plan is going to come after the housing overlay, and you're now saying that that's going to be in about a year, therefore, when this comes up and they get ready to make those changes, is the intent of this, because the petitioner kind of talked about the improvements and the overlay in the overall area, would the intent of the developer be that, okay, not only we know that we are asking for a waiver again, we know that there is a strong potential that the new revitalization plan will be in place, and if it is in place, we are going to agree to meet the revitalization efforts. Because what I will not agree to this, and we'll note on it, is if they're saying, hey, we're just going to request a business delay, but then we come up with new standards, and they come back and they say, well, okay, well, we just approved this delay, but we're going to fall back on the old standards, then I'm not very supportive of the delay, because I would rather see a change made to the facade, and I would even agree to postponing that change if it's going to meet the long-term goals of what we want in the revitalization.
Yeah, I can't speak to the applicant's motives. You would have to ask Blake that. But in terms of your question, there's really two parts to this problem. There is the road improvements, which are more tied to the downtown plan, and then there's the improvements to the actual building. And I think we've tried to thread the needle here in terms of what kind of Commissioner Woodson is hitting on, in terms of how do we modify it, but do it in a way that is respectful of the building. But yeah, there's two different things going on here. There is the public road improvements, and then the building improvements themselves. And we're trying to make recommendations consistent with the general plan, which talk about promoting small businesses and trying to encourage small businesses in Marina. But Commissioner Woodson does have a valid point that it is kind of tied to a nebulous downtown plan that has not been officially adopted yet. So, it's a very difficult permit to work on. So,
Commissioner Woodson, did you have anything else?
No, I'm fine. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner St. John.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to voice my support and also enlightenment from Vice Chair McCarthy, especially since I'm kind of new to this understanding. Anyway, with Vice Chair McCarthy has pointed out that there is a significant change, a material change in the design that was proposed years ago by the Pacific owner or group to the new what's already been built by built in the whole interior design by the Catalyst operations or management group. Anyway, it's almost like it isn't a new ownership legally, but it is definitely not what was approved years ago. And then the next point from Commissioner Woodson, pointing out that adding a additional year plus delay is primarily due to current economic situations of the business. And anyway, I would very much voice my support, my non-support of this type of an extension. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner St. John. I also had concerns because this seemed to be more asking for an extension because they have business issues. And, you know, I understand it's a long process to become a moneymaker. It is not something that you open your doors and you start making a profit right away. That's why there are huge investments up front that you are making in your business. You know that for a period of time, sometimes it's 2 or 3 years before you're running in a profit. You have to have that money available to meet your bills because you're not making enough in the beginning in order to support your business. And I do get that. I am concerned. Part of the reason, if you watched City Council at the time, that this location was approved was because there would be site improvements to that corner. There would be sidewalks, there would be parallel parking. That's a very busy, narrow street. It's not pedestrian friendly. So they were looking forward. The council was definitely looking forward to seeing those site improvements. And that's the thing, the exterior improvements as it relates to public works are the things that are being delayed for a year, and they're very expensive. So I have those, I share the concerns of the other commissioners. What are we actually approving and why? I don't share the concerns about the interior. I was on Planning Commission many years ago, back on Planning Commission again, and we were told that we could not consider the interior design. That's very subjective. How they want to paint the walls and where they want the walls was not our concern. The only time I ever saw it where it became a concern was when the interior design had an impact on the exterior of the building. This is where there were balconies, but they were off of bedrooms that belonged to children 3 stories up, as opposed, and that was the open space, as opposed to being where parents would be watching their children. So it was this health and safety issue. That was where we were able to look at the interior, but the general design, no, it had to actually have an impact on the health and welfare, and their interior design changes has no impact to health and welfare of the public that'll be using it. And, you know, that could have changed, but that's the way it was before. And I'm assuming that those kinds of changes, Planning Commission is about land use and making decisions related to basically, does this work in this spot? And so when we look at the concern about the downtown specific plan that we hope is approved soon, it hasn't been approved. So we have to look at other things. Is it compliant with the general plan? Is it compliant with the site plan? Is it compliant with what's already been approved? By extending this for another year, is that compliant with what was approved? And what's going to happen at the end of that year if they're already having financial difficulty? Is extending it a year going to actually allow them to do it? Or are we just extending the eventual demise of a business? I would share, and I don't know if this is appropriate for decision-making, but when the council looked at cannabis businesses in Marina, before coming up with an ordinance, we were looking at, we actually hired HDL to come in and look and tell us how many dispensaries could be successful in our community. And they said 1, and we approved 3. And the response from the mayor was, well, some of them are going to go out of business. And that seemed to be okay. And I think that's what we're setting ourselves up for through this process of losing multiple businesses and allowing someone to stay in business when they've requested to make these changes in their permit for strictly financial reasons doesn't make sense to me. We're not here to try and support local business so that they can stay open a little bit longer. There's a time when every business has to cut their losses, and what's the best way for them to do it. And that's not our decision, but it is our decision should we allow them to continue to go forward. So at this time, is there any other discussion or questions for staff? And Brian, you waved your hand. Okay, so go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to find the raised hand. I think your comments were very well articulated, so I appreciate that. And I normally wouldn't want to try to get in a back and forth, and I'll try to limit my response, but I do have some ongoing concern about the interior design. And, I wouldn't make it a part of any motion we make tonight, but I would ask, and maybe when the time's appropriate after this hearing, I'll ask staff to kind of come back with some more legal advice and some education for us commissioners on what the law says we can do, because it is very nuanced, right? There could be, the ordinance might say no signs outside the building, but you have a big sign inside the building, it has the same effect. Can you control that, right? Like, I think it's nuanced, and I would like to learn more about that. So I really appreciate your comments. And that was my only response. I'd be ready to make a motion if there's no other comments.
Yes, you may make a motion.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to make a motion that the Planning Commission recommend to the City Council that it deny the modifications to remove the required facade improvements and grant an extension of the site improvements in the City Council Resolution 2020-65. And I would add to that too, I'd like staff to come back, and the sign for this establishment was administratively approved, which I thought was interesting. I'd like for staff to come back and let us know if that was a mistake or if that was by design. And that would be my motion.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion?
I second.
Okay, Commissioner Rana seconded the motion. We need a roll call vote, please.
Second. Commissioner Amadeo,
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy,
Yes.
Commissioner Herr,
Yes.
Commissioner Rana,
Yes.
Commissioner St. John,
Yes.
Commissioner Whitson.
No.
Okay, the motion passes 6-1, and Commissioner Walton has recused herself. The motion passes, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to the second public hearing. That is open a public hearing, take public testimony, and consider adopting a resolution of the Planning Commission approving SG 2022-05 for the installation of signs at the new Starbucks store located at 200 Reservation Road with the APN number. This project is exempt from environmental review per Article 19, Section 15.311 of the CEQA guidelines presented by contract planner Alec Barton. So, Alec?
Before we go on,
Whitson, you
Commissioner
have your
Romero,
hand raised.
I just have a point on my vote and why I voted, because if I had wanted to make an amendment to that, or if I had a requested addition, the information, an answer to my question that the city planner had said needed to go to Mr. Blake, and we didn't give him a chance to respond to that question. beforehand. So procedurally, I have two questions. Number one, if I wanted to apply an amendment, how could I have done that? Because we didn't get a chance to even provide an amendment. Number two, Guido had discussed that he couldn't provide an answer to my question, that it might be better answered by the petitioner, and we never gave the petitioner a chance to respond to my question.
And I do apologize for that. When you have an amendment or an alternate motion, you literally jump in and say, I have a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Okay. Guido.
No, that's the correct procedure. And Commissioner Woodson, we're going to be doing very detailed action minutes for this, because this will be going up to council for this particular item, and your comments will be noted in the detailed minutes. Most of the time we've been doing action minutes, but this is a potential loss of somebody's license. So I'll be asking Karen to do detailed minutes, and your comments will be put in those detailed minutes. So
I would like to know briefly, I've noticed that it says recording paused on this, and it's been that way through the entire meeting. So is Karen going to have something available in order to do detailed minutes?
yeah, that's from my laptop, my city laptop. AMP is actually recording.
Okay, very good.
Their videos are far better than ours, and they put them by date and by city, and I've used them several times in the last 10 months, and they're actually very high quality. So the
Okay.
AMP staff here, thank you for doing your job. So
And then because, and I am concerned about this, I failed to ask Blake to answer the question that staff could not answer, that they wanted to go to him. And I failed to ensure that that question got answered by Blake. So how do we do that?
well, the commission has already voted on the
Yeah.
item, and the motion passed. So I mean, he can certainly answer the question, but the motion's already been made. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So can we go ahead and let him answer the question just for the benefit of the public and for the commissioners?
Absolutely. And we can certainly record the answer and the question in the more detailed minutes. So.
Okay, so Commissioner Woodson, you had asked the question. Do you want to repeat the question?
Well, I think it was more, the issue was that if we approved the delay, and that then took us into when that came up for construction, if the new city revitalization, the building support part of that plan is in place, would they meet the new revitalization guidelines, or would they try to then meet the requirements that were in place today when the extension was approved?
Okay, so Blake, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, Commissioner Woodson, I might even, I'm not trying to go back with the question, but I might try to, just so I'm clear on it. So to the point where we agreed to the Carmel Avenue, is your idea that, so obviously it's a long project, so Del Monte, they approved the modification, so we obviously, you guys are going to build the sidewalk. The issue that we will run into, or that we'll work on, I guess, is that if it gets approved at that same time, to your point, is working with the landlord at that time, because that's where, obviously we're a corner, a corner of it. The Del Monte's the complete other side, and obviously there's other tenants in there. So if they're, essentially combining, you have one side being combined to the other, that would be the goal. The reason I can't answer at this exact time is really I'd have to, we've already kind of discussed this with the landlord what would that look like in terms of, our side of the improvements versus the, full part of the Del Monte side. That would be the goal, but I really would, honestly, that's being that we're simply a tenant of one section of the Mortimer Center. The hope is that we'd be able to, to your point, when a year later, we would have the opportunity to do confide. We would obviously make sure that, when the two sides, I guess, combined, that there wouldn't be any issues. But, you know, like I said, that's a part that we have to really work with the landlord on, because, you know, as you saw, the landlord was happy to do our minor modifications for the, you know, up front, but, you know, this is obviously changing the parking and a lot of, you know, other things that are going to have to be worked upon. If that answers your question.
And I appreciate the answer. And I guess my then takeaway for the planning staff on this would be that the question would then become, if the landlord, again, there's no answer because the landlord isn't here, obviously can't speak, is if a building landlord moving forward has a tenant request, a tenant facility change, and we have the new plan in place and approved for the redevelopment, and this is the facility side, not the infrastructure side of it, who becomes responsible for ensuring that it stays in a conforming use, the tenant or the landlord? Because if Catalyst in this case is one of 5 tenants that use that have buildings space that they use, yet we have a new conforming use in the new developmental plan, then how do we enforce that? And I guess that'll be a takeaway for a different discussion.
Yeah, and once again, some of this is going to get hashed out with the downtown plan. Like I said, as soon as
that's fine. It's just
no.
all this is syncing back together in the future, and I want to try to understand.
I'm not trying to put you off, but I'm just saying. I
understand.
Some of this will get hashed out with the downtown plan and how the language in the downtown plan is written. You know, some say, you know, as soon as the downtown plan's done, then everything has to be implemented. Obviously, some are written to say, if you make more than, say, a 50% change to a building, then you got to do all the improvement, right? So it all kind of, the rubber meets the road in that specific plan. And so I would not be able to answer that today, and not until we get a little, I got to get the affordable housing overlay policy, hopefully through council, and then pivot to the downtown. And then these are all really good questions, Commissioner Whitson, because yeah, we have a lot of businesses and we have a downtown plan. And so, but yeah, unfortunately, I won't be able to fully answer that tonight.
That's fine. Thanks. I appreciate it, Blake. I appreciate it, Cleo.
No, of course. Thank you. Thank you, Planning Commission, again. You all have a good evening. Thank you so much. Good night.
Thank you, Blake. Okay, so we will now go back to the second public hearing, which I already introduced. So let's see, staff person is going to be Alec Barton.
Thank you, Chair Amadeo and members of the commission. So the item I have for you is a sign permit for the soon-to-be new Starbucks at 200 Reservation Road. Let's see if I can get this to move. Just a moment. I'm going to reconfigure this here and figure out if I can get my slides to move. I apologize for the delay. Okay. So the proposal before you involves 3 single-sided wall signs, as well as a double-sided monument sign. The signs would use a white, black, and holly green color scheme that's consistent with corporate branding. The wall signs would consist of a logo sign as well as channel letters, and then an existing monument sign would be refaced with Starbucks insignia and logo. The allowed square footage at this site is 108 square feet, and the applicant is proposing just over 99 square feet of total signage, so it is consistent with the municipal code. The total number of signs allowed is 4, and again, this is consistent as 4 signs are being proposed. Here is a concept showing the east elevation of the building with the logo sign, as well as the drive-through letters. The west elevation would consist of the Starbucks letters as well as additional drive-through letters. And then the existing monument sign would be refaced to include the Starbucks logo and drive-through letters in the lower cabinet. And I'll just note here that the design guidelines and standards for the city of Marina require that any white backgrounds have an opaque finish so that light doesn't bleed through and create excessive glare or annoyance. And the sign proposal that the applicant has submitted is consistent with that design guideline and standard. So the only portions of the sign that would reflect that white color would be the foreground of the sign or the logo. The background portions of the sign would not have any white light pushing through that opaque background. As Chair Amadeo mentioned, this action is exempt from CEQA, and staff would recommend that Planning Commission adopt a resolution approving the sign permit as it is consistent in all ways with the city's design standards and guidelines, as well as the municipal code pertaining to signs. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. I also believe that the applicant, as well as a representative from Starbucks, David Ford and Doug Murphy are on the call this afternoon as well, or this evening. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions from the commissioners at this time? And I'm not seeing any, so I'm going to open the public hearing, but the first to speak would be the applicant. So is that Mr. Ford or the other one, Mr. Murphy? Is that correct? I don't know who's going to speak to us on the applicant's behalf.
Yes, my name is David Ford. I'm the applicant. I'm here on behalf of Superior Electrical Advertising, which is the sign contractor. We worked with Alec on the designs of the signs. We agree with all of the items mentioned in the staff report and the conditions of approval. We don't really have a presentation. I think that the drawings pretty much speak for themselves, but I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, Doug Murphy with Starbucks is on as well and available to answer any questions.
Okay, before the commissioners ask questions, Mr. Murphy, do you have anything you'd like to offer as well?
We're excited about the project. I know we started construction, and I think this is the last set of permits that we'll need to finish the project here. So we're excited about it. I think we had two submittals, or rather a revision to the submittal to opaque the signs, and I think they do a good job of branding our store, and it's a little bit at the entrance to Marina. So we think it's a really nice looking site with good signage.
Thank you. Okay, we're gonna move on to the public first. And it looks like we only have one member of the public. So if you would like to speak, now's the time to raise your hand. And I don't see anybody. So now we're gonna close the public hearing and go back to the commissioners. So Commissioner Woodson.
Sure. Make sure, since I don't have the image up when I was thinking about this. So we have this, we're reusing the old sign. The main square is going to be a translucent white with the standard green Starbucks logo. And then there's a rectangle underneath that says drive-through. And that is going to be the same translucent with a green lettering. Is that correct?
On the base of the sign where it says drive-through, the letters drive-through are actually black. It will be a perforated vinyl. Okay. So at night, the letters would illuminate as white and the white background would be black. It's almost reverse the colors, essentially.
Okay, so that works. The main thing is the main background is white and the lettering is dark. Like the reason I raised the question is that having, just from a contrasting perspective, that just seems an awful lot of white. And it seems that having looked online, granted this is very limited to what shows up online of images of Starbucks across the country, the majority of the time, in fact, every time that I have seen a Starbucks with a drive-in subset rectangle underneath, the actual background is dark colored and the Starbucks is in white. And it just feels like from a consistency perspective, I wonder why you decided to go with something that does not seem to be traditional across the rest of the country, number one. And that's my main question. Then I am going to make a statement because I am somewhat frustrated that a developer who has deep enough pockets, when they started the construction of this, and while in between transition period with the old Burger King closed until you started construction the day before you started construction, and until there was a significant pushback from the community that was posted online, you just allowed that entire facility to get run down, to get overgrown. It was suggested and requested that fencing was put in. It was ignored. And then finally you put up fencing, but unlike every other contractor in our city who has put up fencing and has put up some type of screen around it to hide the construction, you have just allowed that entire thing to be seen. And as you just stated, and this is why I'm actually saying this is a key area to our city and an entryway, and you have allowed it for 4 months to sit and look the exact way it is. And that is very distressing, that you say one thing about it being a gateway to our city, but then have treated that property and the city in a terrible position for the last 4 months since you closed Burger King and started the construction. So,
hey, David, let me speak to that. Glenn, was that Glenn?
Yeah.
Thanks for your comments. So, let me address the fencing stuff first, because we didn't take possession of the site. It was not, there was a transfer of not ownership, but possession of the site. And it was not the 4 months that we had possession, but I understand the issues that you're raising. And I was not aware that the city was concerned about the well-being of the site. Mayor Bruce Delgado reached out to me to look for the email, but it was probably about a month and a half ago. I think it was early August, and I responded to him the same day. And we got our construction team out there to set up the fencing as soon as possible. I think it might have been a 1 week turnaround. So I would definitely apologize that we were not aware of the condition of the site. For some of the time being, it was us. Previous to that, it would have been the Burger King. So we simply weren't aware. I'm not sure if Bruce Delgado relayed some of that, if the mayor relayed some of that information to the planning department or not. So again, my apologies. We're happy to be where we are now. I know it's been a long process, and so I want to speak to that element first. Is there anything else on the fencing there that I can help out or provide clarity to?
I think mine was, you put the fencing up, and I understand the delay, and I understand when the mayor reached out to you, because it was a very quick turnaround once it hit a simmering boiling point on social media internally on a couple of Marina Facebook sites and next door.
Fair enough.
You did turn around pretty quickly and put the fence up, but you didn't put privacy screening up to hide so it's still totally seen. At least it can't be trespassed on. And that was another problem that was happening, but that's not much you can do about that. But then my other question was, again, coming back to the drive-through portion of it, that from a national perspective, it seems like when you have an external sign that has the main Starbucks logo, and then you have a bottom sign that says drive-through to promote your drive-through, which is perfectly logical, that usually that drive-through is reversed with a dark background and a white lettering versus the main screen. I was just wondering why break from kind of what seems to be more the traditional Starbucks side.
Yeah, I can certainly speak to that. There's not we have design standards that are constantly changing. And if I'm completely honest about it, sometimes we get it wrong. And so we will put white background up on a white building, or black or dark background up on a dark building, which is not what we want to do. We want to emphasize, we want the signage to do what it's supposed to do, which is to draw attention. So in this circumstance, I think, I guess to speak to it, I'm not an expert on the signage. I'm more from the real estate side, but I don't believe that there's a standard of dark or light. I think it comes to more of, how can we emphasize the signage so that it, can draw customers and provide direction to them. In the case of this sign, I think the Burger King sign beforehand I'm looking at a picture of it right now, was predominantly white in the background before, or opaque with their insignia in the center. So I think it's closer to that and more reflective, not of a national standard, but of just trying to emphasize the Starbucks brand and call out to the customers.
Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Certainly.
Vice Chair McCarthy, I didn't realize I had muted myself.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question and a comment that really kind of mirror Commissioner Woodson's, but I think they're different enough that I'd like to ask them. So the first one has to do with the monument sign, and I'm just curious, and honestly, your answer doesn't necessarily impact, I think, the way I would vote tonight, but it seems to me that if this was a new site, that a more rounded style sign would likely have been used, and please feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm just curious if you can add some color. Why choose to retrofit? Is it because it's just plain cheaper? Is it because from a legal perspective, you think there's more of a standing to have that sign there, or is that really what you want, all things else aside?
I don't have the background on why my thought is that we probably kept the sign because it was already existing, and if we were to remove it, I'm not sure if we would get another monument sign there. I would suppose so. That seems to be a common theme in signage, especially older signage. So that's likely what it is. We probably wouldn't do the signage stuff's interesting because some places, we kind of reflect what the demands or what the code of the city is. And so signage calculations are sort of their own thing. Some cities will, even if you have a round sign, they count the total square footage is actually not of the diameter, but rather of like the square that would surround it, even if there's nothing there. So I guess that just is to illuminate some of the nuances of signage. But in this instance, we likely kept it because we didn't want to risk losing the sign.
Okay, that's helpful. And Doug, I forgot to say, I appreciate you being here. When this item originally came before this body, I don't think there was a representative from Starbucks, if I'm not mistaken. Correct me if I'm wrong, but so I appreciate you being here. My statement that kind of mirrors Glenn's is, I don't know what Starbucks corporate values are. I really wish that a representative would have been more willing to engage our community. This did create quite a bit of controversy, and still to this day, people aren't happy about it, to be honest with you. And I know that's not what's before us tonight, but I'll just leave it at, I hope if there's an opportunity for you to engage our community that you'll take advantage of that. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair McCarthy. Do we have any other questions or comments from the commissioners? And I do not see any hands raised, so I will entertain a motion.
Motion?
I will make a motion to pass the approval as written by the staff. If they had it up, I would read the whole thing if the staff did.
A second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Commissioner Woodson to approve the resolution and a second by Vice Chair McCarthy. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Sure. Let me make sure I'm not muted. So 1 second. 1 second. Yes. Chair Amadeo.
Yes.
Vice Chair McCarthy.
Yes.
Commissioner Herr.
Yes.
Commissioner Rana.
Yes.
Commissioner St. John.
Yes.
Commissioner Walton.
Yes.
Commissioner Woodson.
Yes.
Motion passes, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank the applicant and both David Ford and the Starbucks representatives, Mr. Murphy. So thank you very much. We appreciate your time tonight. Okay. We have no action items. We have no discussion items, so we'll move on to commissioner comments and staff informational reports. Do any commissioners have any comments? Yes, Vice Chair McCarthy.
Thank you, Chair. Super quick. I did attend the monthly League of California Cities Planning Department meeting. It'll probably be one of my last ones. I hope that one of my fellow commissioners will pick up the whatever the word is on that and start attending those meetings. If you want the information, I'm happy to send it to you. They did discuss a lot of the legislative changes, and there's two that I just want to call out. One is, I believe ADU heights are by state law are going from 16 to 18 feet. So if Allison's still on, I guess she's probably going to be coming back to us with some legislative change there. And as long as it's within a half a mile of major transit. So that was one assembly bill. And the other one that stood out to me was that a bill that passed that allows school districts to turn underutilized land into housing for teachers. So I don't know what NPUSD land in Marina looks like in terms of underutilized, and if they may want to take action on that. I know that the PK has spoken publicly about the need for teacher housing. So I just wanted to share that with the commission. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other commissioners? No, I have one comment that the League of California Cities, and you should have gotten an email from, I believe, from Karen, letting us know that it's time to say, hey, yes, I'd like to attend the Commissioner Academy. I've already said yes, I definitely want to be there. I highly suggest that commissioners take advantage of the opportunity. They're always interesting, all kinds of workshops. I never fail to learn something new when I go to one of these conferences. So please consider it. And that's all I have. So Guido, do you have anything that you would like to share?
Yeah, and then I was working with the finance director. So 3 have expressed interest. Actually, I can move a little bit of money around in my budget if another commissioner, but no, probably no more than 4. So the October 27th meeting, I don't really have much to take. I had one small item, but the Cal-Am desal plant, there is a community meeting that night, and I thought it was important for the commission to be able to go to that meeting. Councilmember Biala is on the call. She's working with the city manager to get a flyer out for that. As soon as I get it from them, I will kick it out to the commission. If you go, don't sit next to each other, just Brown Act type stuff. But yeah, the next time I would see you guys would be November 10th. And then I understood from the chair that I guess the tradition in Marina is to have one meeting in November and one in December. So you don't have to answer now, but I was trying to budget for one more reserve meeting just to be safe, just to help out our customers. So I didn't know if December 1st might work for the commissioners. And I don't, at this time, I don't anticipate needing the meeting, but I do have customers I have to serve. So I was going to ask the commission, you don't have to give an answer today. If you could just email me and say, yeah, December 1st works for me. And then if I have to cancel it, I'll just cancel it. And then to Commissioner McCarthy's point, December 8th, I'm going to be asking the city attorney to give an update on the new laws to the commission. We're going to be doing training with her next Tuesday. The staff will. And you guys have seen part of my initiative of being here is to keep our zoning code up to date. There are 3 or 4 bills, one of them that the vice chair mentioned. So yeah, once again, trying to build the culture of as laws get adopted, that we change the code, but we as a city are not in a reactive mode, that we're constantly changing our code to be current with the current law. So yeah, so we have a lot going on. And so, yeah, I will see you guys November 10th. So, and I don't know if the Vice Mayor, Biala, if you wanted to comment on the CalAm, is it at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock, or I'm not sure exactly the time. So not sure if she's still there. She's still on the call.
Vice Chair Kathy Biala, if you want to unmute yourself, you can respond to Guido.
All right, well, she's not. So,
And
just,
she's not.
Yeah.
Okay, so
I think
Oh.
it's from 6 to 8 p.m.
Okay,
Marina Library, Free Water Forum.
great.
okay, thank you. And Commissioner Woodson, you've had your hand up for a while.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure that was one of it, was to confirm that we are canceling the 27th so that we can choose to go to that. That's fine.
Right.
And then the second thing I wanted to say was thanks for setting up the discussion this week. Seems like last week. It's gone with the developers and planners for Cypress Knolls.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Commissioner Woodson. Yeah, so all of you should have received an invite at this point. If you have not, please let me know. We are restarting the Cypress Knolls project. And so we have a APA committee who are meeting with all the commissioners, council members, and a few key stakeholders. So you should have gotten an invite. If you have not, please ping me and I will bug them to make sure you guys get set up.
Okay, if there is nothing else, because I don't see any correspondence as well, then I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all for attending. Good job.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everybody.